All right. So last time that we talked about solving one-step equations. One step. And we talked about how each one of them had their own unique way of solving it. So if it was an x plus, and we'll use a number for this, x plus 5, say equals 15, to solve that, we said we would subtract a 5 from both sides. And that would give us x. Those would cancel each other out, equals 10. If it was x minus 5 equals 15, then we would add 5 to both sides, and we would come up with x, those would cancel each other out, equals 20. We also talked about if I had 5x equals 15, that I would divide both sides by 5, and I would get x equals 3. And finally, if I had x over 5 equals 15, I would multiply both sides by 5, and the 5's would cancel here, and I would get x equals 75. So in essence, what you're looking at here is I'm doing the opposite of what I'm doing to the x. If I'm adding 5 to x, then I'll subtract 5. If I'm subtracting 5 from x, and let me do this here so I can point to it. If I'm subtracting 5 from x, I would add 5. If I was multiplying x to 5, then I would divide by 5. And if I was dividing by 5, then I would multiply by 5. So I'm going to do the opposite of what I'm doing to the x. So today, what we're talking about is not one step anymore, but we want to solve two-step equations. Two-step equations. So we're solving two-step equations. So what does a two-step equation look like? So a two-step equation would look something like this. 2x plus 5 equals 13. This is what a two-step equation is going to look like. And the question is, what do I do to solve this? Well, I want you to think about this for a second. I'm going to move this over a little bit here. And I want you to think about this for a second. We know the variable is an x. So I'm going to write down here what I did to x. I'm going to figure out what am I doing in the problem before I even start solving it. What am I doing to the x? And if you look at it closely enough, the first thing I did to the x, because here's the x, the first thing I did is it looks like I made it a 2x, which means I multiplied, oops, hold on, that's terrible. Let's try that again. I multiplied by 2. So that gave me a 2x. That gave me my 2x. Then what I do? Well, it looks like I took my term of 2x and I added 5 to it. So the second thing I did, my second thing was I added 5. So now my goal is to solve this equation. And of course, by the way, I set it equal to 13, but what's on the other side of the equal sign doesn't matter right now. But I want to solve it. Remember that we said to solve an equation was to undo, to do the opposite of what I did. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the opposite of what I did, but I'm going to work it backwards. So I'm going to undo the second step first. Well, how do I undo adding a 5? Correct. I would subtract 5, and I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. Remember, what you say is important. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. When I subtract 5 from both sides, I didn't do anything to 2x, so the 2x stays. The 5 and the negative 5 cancel out, equals 13 minus 5, which is 8. So I just undid adding 5. So what's left is multiplying by 2. Well, how do I undo multiplying by 2? Well, this actually looks like a one-step equation. So it's pretty simple and straightforward that I would take both sides and divide it by 2. That's exactly what I would do. And the 2's cancel out, so I get x equals, and then 8 divided by 2 is 4. So my answer is x equals 4. The neat thing about equations is, by the way, before I move on, I finished that step, and that's what gave me my answer. The neat thing about equations is that I'm able to check to see if my answer is correct. So what I'm going to end up doing to check to make sure I got it right is I'm going to take x and I'm going to replace it with 4. So I have a 2 times, but I'm going to use my solution of 4 plus 5, and that better equal 13. Well, we know order of operations will multiply first. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 5, does that equal 13? And finally, I'll do 8 plus 5, which is 13, and that equals 13. So since that's true, I know I've got the problem correct. Let's have you try one of these. So I'm going to give you a problem here, and I would like you to try to solve it. And we're going to do 3x minus 7 equals 11. So pause the video, try this problem, and then come back and we'll see if you did it correctly. Okay. So let's see if you did this correctly. If you wrote off to the side the what I did to x, because that's my variable, you would have said, the first thing you would have said was you multiplied it by 3. And then you would have said you subtracted 7. So to undo that, I'm going to do this subtracting of 7 first. And to undo a subtracting of 7, I'm going to add 7. And I'll do that to both sides. So nothing to the 3x. The negative 7 and the positive 7 cancel out, equals 18. So that's done. So now I have to undo multiply by 3, and to undo multiply by 3, we, of course, divide both sides by 3. Those 3's cancel. The 3's cancel. Sorry, I did something, so I don't know where I'm picking up at. The 3's cancel, and then 18 divided by 3 is 6. So x should be equal to 6. Now, let's just check to make sure if that's right. 3, oops, didn't want to do that. Picked the wrong thing. Let's try that again. 3 times 6 minus 7, does that equal 11? Well, 3 times 6 is 18 minus 7, does that equal 11? And 18 minus 7 is 11. So 11 equals 11, so I know I'm absolutely correct. So that is the correct answer. All right, let's try another one here. Let me have you try this one. X over 4 minus 5 equals negative 1. Would you try this one? Pause the recording and try this one for me. Okay, let's see. Let's move that over a little bit. What I did to x. So the first thing I would have done to x is this time I divided it by 4. Because if you look at this, the first thing I did was I divided by 4. Then the second thing I did was I subtracted 5. And so now if I do this properly, I'm going to undo what I had done. So let's see, to undo this, I'll start by undoing the subtracting of 5. How do I undo subtracting of 5? Exactly. You add 5 to both sides. Adding 5 to both sides, I get x over 4 equals 4. Okay, that's done. So now I'm going to undo divided by 4. And how do I undo a dividing by 4? Yes, you multiply both sides by 4. And when you do that, the 4's will cancel out to give me x, and 4 times 4 is 16. Done. But let's make sure that's correct. 16 divided by 4 minus 5, does that equal -1? 16 divided by 4 is 4 minus 5, does that equal -1? And of course 4 minus 5 is -1, so -1 equals -1, so I am, in fact, correct. So that's what it takes to solve a two-step equation. So now that you have seen how to do that, you're going to get some more practice through your Edulastic assignment. So now that you finish watching the video, click that you turn it in on your Google Classroom, and then go to Edulastic and try the Edulastic assignment on solving two-step equations. And then I will see you on Thursday in the Zoom meeting. And remember that the way we take attendance now in the Zoom meetings is by a code word that I will give you sometime during the Zoom meeting. So don't go to the Google form until I give you the code word that will allow you to go into the form to fill it out and tell me that you actually were in the Zoom. So have a good night, have a good day, have a good night, and I will see you on Thursday.